what methods are you going to employ to make sure that today's college students have the same opportunities that your generation did coming out of the university and joining the workforce?
Well, there are a number of major problems. I mean, we had a weak economy going into the Wall Street collapse. The weak economy, I think, was due in good part to free trade agreements. I've never voted for a free trade agreement. We're not creating a level playing field with other countries. We're opening our markets to their cheap goods, their cheap labor, their lack of environmental enforcement in their countries, and then asking Americans to compete. Now, at first, sort of the elite said, oh, well, it doesn't matter, it's just those old manufacturing jobs. Even then, I would say, I don't know how you'd be a great country if you don't make things anymore. But they'd say, oh, don't worry, everybody's going to be service jobs, educated. Now we're finding our engineering jobs, our technical jobs. That stuff follows the manufacturing. So you're finding in China now, they're employing a whole lot of people to do development for photovoltaics or for chips or software and all those things. So we're losing the highest skilled jobs now too. We need a new trade policy that'll bring and keep jobs home, and I've been fighting for that for years. We're starting to make some progress. Passed the first bill ever since I've been there in the House, just before we recessed, to fight against Chinese currency manipulation, something that the Obama administration wasn't willing to do. I mean, I've never had a president who was good on trade policy. I opposed Clinton on NAFTA and China. I opposed Bush on his free trade agreements, and I'm going to oppose Obama on his if he goes down that path. So that was a weak thing, and we've lost a lot of jobs from all levels because of bad trade policy. Secondly, was we allowed the financial economy to grow too big. I mean, a few years ago, half the MIT graduates were going to work on Wall Street. They were called quants. They were creating exotic theorems and theories and new ways to gamble, not create any substance or wealth except for the people they worked for. And they gambled and created instruments of financial mass destruction, and Wall Street, destroyed our economy. I voted against the deregulation of Wall Street. Again, that was Clinton and a Republican Congress. I stood against it. I stood against dismantling those protections. I wanted to regulate derivatives. I agreed with Warren Buffett. So we have now put some reforms in place for Wall Street, but this administration has paid much attention to the financial sector. I called 8 months before the Republican leader, I called for Secretary Geithner and Larry Summers, the head of the President's Economic Council, to go, because they are not representing Main Street needs, average Americans, and their whole orientation is toward Wall Street. We need to be looking toward Main Street. What are we going to do to create jobs here in America? That goes, as I said earlier, to trade policies, but also goes to tax policies. It also goes to what we allow Wall Street to do. And I would go further in regulating Wall Street, and I'd love to put some of those people in jail. So we need an overhaul from the top down in what the government does in terms of the way it invests. I oppose the stimulus because the stimulus ended up when the president decided he wanted to buy Republican Senate votes. They cut out investment I had in there in transportation and infrastructure. They cut out school construction. They cut out a third of the funding for education that was in the stimulus bill, all for tax cuts to get 3 Republican Senate votes. So we need tax policies that raise money from the richest people in this country who are not paying anywhere near their fair share. And that money will be used and invested productively by the government to educate people and put people back to work. And then we level the playing field with free trade. And I think that'll help Oregonians.
In the state and in the nation, what we need is a better environment in which to do business in industry. We'll use those terms. We can talk about productive industry, whatever you like. You know what I'm talking about. Our businesses and industry and the places where we do things and have jobs have been suffering for a long time as the bureaucracy and power in Washington has grown. So more of their capital is taxed away, and they live in a more and more unfavorable regulatory environment. We also have a little problem with our legal system, which has become part of that regulatory environment. The result is that internally within the country and in the state, it becomes harder and harder to do business. And as you lose your capital, and as you have to spend the capital that remains more and more on governmental rules, it's harder and harder to employ people and make things. Now, there are basically two reactions. One, if your business is such that it must stay here, you just do more poorly and you generate fewer jobs. But a lot of businesses have moved abroad. And they've moved abroad because they found a better environment elsewhere than here. And that needs to be corrected, then they can come back. So we have two problems: bringing our industries and businesses back from abroad and making the ones within the country and state prosper. And those require us to recognize we have a free enterprise economy that generates all our wealth, and we need to make sure the government is a benefit to that rather than an impediment by making taxes too high and regulations too onerous.
With the rising cost of tuition and the overall cost of being a student increasing, what can student voters look for positively in your campaign?
Well, the main thing you have to look for is a rebirth and rise of the private economy, which produces wealth, because you need jobs when you get out of school, and while you're in school, you need an economy that produces the prosperity to pay for these things. Of course, many of the students depend upon loans, and of course the university depends upon tax money, and that money, of course, is all derived from the private sector ultimately. So the best things are to revive the private sector, which will make it easier to go to college and also give you a place to go after you get out. And I think that the ideas, the things I represent, are more likely to revive the private sector than some of the things on the other side.
Well, many years ago we had a president at the U of O named Miles Brand. He came to me when I was a new member of Congress, and he said, look, you know, if we did away with these subsidized bank loans, we gave everybody direct student loans, we would save so much money that we could lower interest rates and give more students financial aid. And I said, great idea. So I started many years ago working on that, and actually this last year we did that. We took away the subsidies to the banks, and we're channeling all the money directly through National Direct Student Loans, and we're going to have lower interest rates. We're going to have loan forgiveness programs. So if you go into a low-paying job, public service job, you can get loan forgiveness. You will be limited in terms of how much you would ever have to pay, what % of your income back, and after a certain number of years, the loans just go away if you've been making payments faithfully. I think it's 15 years. So we saved so much money by stopping the subsidies to the banks that we were able to put another $60 billion into Pell Grants. We've increased the amount of funding you can get in a Pell Grant, and we've increased the number of Pell Grants dramatically with that $60 billion. So my opponent says there should be no federal financial aid of any sort to students, none. He answered a Project Vote Smart questionnaire. It says no federal financial aid to any students of any sort. I mean, he also goes on to say the government shouldn't invest anything in education, but he particularly answered a question, check the box, that's unequivocal, no federal financial aid. I support financial aid, I support Pell Grants, I support loan forgiveness, and I've voted that way.
And then lastly, are you ducks or beavers?
Oh, I'm a duck. I went to graduate school here, so I'm a duck. Okay. Although, however, I do represent Corvallis, so I don't ever wear my green and yellow to Corvallis.
It's a constant internal civil war for you.
I have a couple of beavers on my staff. My campaign manager is a beaver. One of my field staff is a beaver. So I'm comfortable up there. They're nice people up there. It's just once a year, or more than once a year, whenever we meet, I'm with the ducks. On any other Saturday, I'm with the beavers against somebody other than Oregon. Sure.
Lastly, as a representative of the 4th District,
Yeah.
Are you going to be a Ducks fan or a Beavers fan? There's a conflict there.
Well, that'd be a very dangerous question to answer.
Yes, it is.
I have three of my students are through school. They have doctorates, and 3 are working for doctorates at Oregon State. But we haven't come down on the side of either team, and I don't think this is a good place to do that. Yeah. There's a nice picture of me in your thing for your next football game, but that doesn't answer the question.